Week 12 of the fantasy football season, and here's the top 12 tight ends I'm ranking this week. Number one, who else would it be than Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs? So Travis Kelce, what a season it's been for him. Last week, a 3-touchdown game versus the Los Angeles Chargers. I'm not saying this week he's going to go for 3 touchdowns, but he's pretty much a guy you can pencil in each and every week for 20 to 25 fantasy points with a touchdown. And this week here versus a Ram defense that hasn't been all that great this season. Once again, I think Kelce has a good game, and I got him in one. Number 2, Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens. So Mark Andrews, I know this season has been good in the first half, but the last few weeks he's been nicked up with a shoulder injury. But this week here, I think he gets right. It's a good matchup at the Jacksonville Jaguar defense that really don't stop anyone. And if him and Lamar Jackson get back on the same page, Mark Andrews is another guy. You pretty much could pencil him in anywhere from 20 to 25 fantasy points. So this week with a good matchup, hopefully that shoulder healing a little bit better over the last couple weeks, coming off the bye in week 10 here, that he puts up a good game. Number 3, George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers. So Kittle had the best game of the season here for him versus the Arizona Cardinals in week 11 with 2 touchdowns in that one. And we know George Kittle still has that breakaway speed. We know he still could be a playmaker. And it's just about getting him in position and making plays for this 49er team. And this week here versus the New Orleans Saints, I think we could see it once again. And he's always been a Jimmy Garoppolo favorite and security blanket. So this week here, Kittle, after coming off the big ball game, looking healthy, and another decent matchup versus the Saints, I got him at number 3 at the tight end position. That's been one of the weakest in a very long time this season. Number 4, TJ Hawkinson of the Minnesota Vikings. So TJ Hawkinson, a great acquisition at the trade deadline, no doubt about it, to add to this Viking offense. But last week he didn't really do much. And this Cowboy team, they came in there and shocked this Viking offense. But this week here versus New England, I think a lot of Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson we're going to see over there for this Minnesota Viking team. They got to get back on track. Kirk Cousins, he likes targeting Hawkinson a lot. Even in that Cowboy game, they did target him a couple times near the end zone, and it was just a couple balls that went through his arms and the ones that caught him off guard. But this week here versus the Patriots on Thanksgiving night, I think TJ Hawkinson has a good ball game, and I got him in number 4. Number 5, Pat Freiermuth of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Pat Freiermuth having a good season, and one of the only guys that Kenny Pickett pretty much targets has been Freiermuth and George Pickens as his top 2 targets in this offense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Pat Freiermuth last season was pretty solid in his rookie year. This year we've seen some good ball games out of him, and he's a tight end, top 10 in scoring this season at the position. I know on Monday Night Football it's not the greatest of matchups at the Indianapolis Colts. That's been a pretty solid universe tight ends this season, but Pat Freiermuth is a guy. I got number 5 this week. Number 6, Tyler Higbee of the Los Angeles Rams. So yes, I don't know who's going to be throwing the football. Matt Stafford has a concussion. I doubt he's going to play. John Wolford, he was hurt with a neck injury after starting a few weeks ago. And Bryce Perkins, he's more of a runner of the football and a guy, we don't know if he's really going to stretch the field for this Ram team. But Tyler Higbee, number 1 option right now in the passing game. Van Jefferson really hasn't done much this season. Ben Skowronek, he's pretty much a slot guy, and he's a guy that's not going to do much. And Allen Robinson's been a bust for the most part for this Ram team. So I think Higbee's the number 1 option in this offense. This is a ball game where they're going to be chasing points, I believe, by the second, third quarter is this Los Angeles Ram team at the Chiefs. And Tyler Higbee's a guy that's a security blanket, especially to a young quarterback like a Perkins, if he's going to start. And a guy that could put up at least 9, 12 fantasy points in PPR leagues. Number 7, Dalton Schultz of the Dallas Cowboys. So Dalton Schultz, 3 out of 4 games since Dak Prescott's been back in the lineup. He's had good ball games with 9 or more fantasy points. I know last week not much was going on for this Cowboy offense besides Tony Pollard and Zeke Elliott having the 2 monster games for this Cowboy team. So right here, Dalton Schultz, good matchup versus the New York Giants. Him and Dak Prescott have a great rapport and always make some big plays. And Schultz over the last couple seasons had a good track record versus the Giant team. So right now, his fantasy value's definitely gone up over the last few weeks, going from Cooper Rush back to Dak Prescott. And this week here, I got him in number 7, where I could see him having 40, 50 yards and finding the end zone. Number 8, Dawson Knox of the Buffalo Bills. So Dawson Knox last week, 14 fantasy points, one of the best games of his season this year in fantasy football. And this week here, a good matchup of the Detroit Lions that give up the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. So Dawson Knox last season had a breakout season with 9 touchdowns. And this year here, it just hasn't been there for Dawson Knox. But I think in this one at Detroit, 40, 50 yards and the touchdown is definitely a possibility. This Bill team played the home game last week at Detroit because of the snowstorms in Buffalo. So right now they've been there. I think they're going to be loosened up, and I think this offense has a breakout performance. Once again, after over the last few weeks, this offense hasn't been as high-powered as it's been early in the season and even last season. So I got him in 8. Number 9, David Njoku of the Cleveland Browns. And Njoku came back off a high ankle sprain last week in the ball game. And yes, he didn't do much, but this week here versus Tampa Bay, this is another ball game where I think the Cleveland Browns are going to be chasing points like they did last week versus the Buffalo Bills. And David Njoku's an athlete. He was on his way to one of the best seasons of his NFL career before going down with the injury was David Njoku. So this week here versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he's a guy I still have confidence in to go out there and make some plays. And I think he could do it this week at number 9, number 10, Juwan Johnson of the New Orleans Saints. And Juwan Johnson, he's been a touchdown machine over the last few weeks here for this New Orleans Saints team, finding the end zone the last 5 games with 5 touchdowns here for Juwan Johnson. So right now, him and Andy Dalton have a good rapport. This could be a ball game here for Juwan Johnson where they're chasing points in this one once again versus the San Francisco 49ers. So right now, 40 or 50 yards and a touchdown, it's definitely a possibility for Juwan Johnson. And a guy who's still out there in a decent amount of fantasy leagues. So for some reason, if he's on your waiver wire, he's a guy who will go out there and get his Johnson. And this week, they'll put a matchup where they're going to be chasing points. I got him at 10, number 11, Cole Kmet of the Chicago Bears. So Cole Kmet, he had 5 touchdowns in his last 3 games going into last week. But last week, that Chicago Bear offense, for whatever reason, just couldn't get the job done in the passing game versus a weak Atlanta Falcon pass defense. But it was a good game for David Montgomery. This week here could be a ball game where Trevor Siemian might even have to start. And obviously they're going to be passing a lot in that one to Cole Kmet, who's the number 2 target behind Darnell Mooney on the offense over there for the Chicago Bear team. So Cole Kmet, he's had a breakout season for the most part, even though the first 8 to 9 weeks of the season he didn't do much for the Chicago Bear team. But even coming off a bad week at a weak tight end position this season here, I got him in number 11, and the 12th and final tight end I'm ranking this week's Foster Moreau of the Las Vegas Raiders. So the reason I got him in number 12 this week here, he's got a good matchup versus the Seattle Seahawks. I give up the second most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. We know Darren Waller, he's out at least a few more weeks, and it wouldn't be surprising me if they just sit him out for the season. So I know a lot of people dropped Foster Moreau after the waiver period, after only coming off a 4 fantasy point game last week. But right here with a good matchup, like I said, versus Seattle, that gives up the second most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. I think Moreau bounces back in this one, and I wouldn't be surprised if he has anywhere from 8 to 12 fantasy points. So that's the top 12 tight ends I'm ranking week 12 of the fantasy football season.